Welcome everyone to Comics from the Multiverse episode 405. I am Peter and joining me as always is Matt.
Hey, bangarang.
Connor's somewhere. I don't know where Connor is.
He's lost in the Speed Force.
I don't know.
If the Flash book can be believed, it's just collecting gingers.
This is a DC Comics podcast. We get together, we talk about the books we read this week. It is a quiet week, but hey, we're here. We're going to talk about Detective Comics 1084, The Flash issue 8, Green Arrow issue 11. Well, Matt will anyway. The Penguin issue 9. Matt will talk about Power Girl issue 8. And I've got a Patreon book of American Vampire Second Cycle issue 7. So it's a quiet week. And there's no news either. No solicits. We're running on empty here. But I didn't get little sleep. I just woke up very, very early. So I'm running low on the fumes myself. So you know what? It being a little bit of a shorter week isn't the worst thing in the world. I can get on board with it. How was your week, Matt?
It was good. It was nice to be done with my comics by Friday. So I didn't have to wake up this morning and bang through some of them. So that was nice. But yeah, and it was a pretty good collection of books this week too. Even Green Arrow, maybe. Oh, that's called suspense.
That's a bold thing to say. It's almost like you're patting yourself on the back. That's like if you said that's a tease, that's objectively true. But you saying that's suspense means you think that was successful and that you've created suspense. And I think that's a little bit egotistical, quite frankly, Matt.
I need a reason to keep reading this book, Pete. I need to know that people want it.
But so the book's not creating suspense, so you're trying to do it on the show.
Look, if you want to know about time-traveling cyborgs that's not, Terminator, yeah, why not in an Archer book? But hey, we'll get to there. All right.
What was my week? I mean, my week was just kind of pretty similar to last week. I'm still working through Fallout. I'm almost done with that season and reviewing it over on the TV review channel. It's still pretty good. And Shogun finished its season, so that's that wrapped up review wise. It was Alien Day this week. We put out the episode of the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast, The Ace. We put out a review of Prometheus. So for the 5th year in a row, it's an Alien movie review on Alien Day. We will not be having one next year though, because the new movie's coming out at the end of the summer. So we'll be doing Alien Covenant sometime before then. So we'll have them all cut up and ready to go.
Look, I want to specifically call out the sickos that have Alien Covenant high on their rankings that I saw yesterday for Alien Day.
Depraved, deviants, you might call them.
And some of you are my friends, and I consider you, in the inner circle, and I just want you to reevaluate your life. That's all.
Yeah. So I'm staring down the barrel at Alien Covenant at some point in the summer. I'm also staring down a much closer shotgun, though, because tomorrow I have to watch Rebel Moon Part 2, and I am not looking forward to that in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, my goodness.
Have
fun, bud. I don't wish that upon my worst enemy.
Yeah, I need to watch the Zack Snyder movie, and I'm not happy about it.
Well, if at least you had happier thoughts about Part 1, but from what I remember you talking about Part 1... The idea that you're coming back to finish is just,
It might have been his worst movie, or close to his worst movie.
That's a lot. Because Sucker Punch exists.
I think Sucker Punch is probably the worst. It's probably the second worst because of Sucker Punch, but I think it's worse than all the other ones, and that is saying something.
Yeah, man, I remember when Zack Snyder was a name you could kind of be excited about, and then he did superhero stuff, and it's just...
I never even liked 300 though. So.
See, I did. I thought it had a nice style. It kind of ate the style of the comic, and I think it did it pretty well. It is kind of machismo, personified, dripping testosterone, but I still think it tells the story that it, it still executes pretty well. I feel like a lot of his that I've seen afterwards didn't. So, especially the superhero stuff. I know some people stand up for Watchmen. I can't. I didn't have good. The first time I saw it was not a good time.
I remember thinking it was fine when I first saw it in 2009 because I hadn't read the book in a while. But when I read the comic again and tried watching the movie again, it completely fell apart. It was very clear at a comparison just how shallow and much he was just kind of like lifting visuals from the comic without really understanding why the comic worked. So it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to talk about Zack Snyder because
I feel you have to do that tomorrow after you watch the movie.
Well, not that, but I feel like every single week he seems to do some stupid interview where he says something engineered to piss me off, and I'm just not going to give him the time of day now. All right, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to come on here and rant. I'm not going to come and talk about any of the dumb things he's saying. We're just going to move on with our lives. I'll review, if I have to review a movie, I'll talk about the movie and said thing, but... You
sound like when I went to therapy and I said I wasn't going to talk about my dad, and then really started talking about my dad. So,
No,
trauma.
No. I think that's a smart move.
Real quick, so I did watch a movie I want to talk to you about. It's an old 80s, I think 80s, maybe 79, horror movie called Tourist Trap.
Okay, I've seen that.
That was delightfully weird. I had a pretty good time watching that.
I don't remember it too well. I remember being decent and having some quirky elements but yeah, it's been a while.
I don't want to give too much away, but there's definitely an element there that I felt like they kind of forget about halfway through. But it made for some good scares early on. So, but yeah, I had a lot of fun watching that. So I'm trying to go through, certain slasher movies that I might have missed, and that was up there. The Toby Hooper one that I always confuse Tourist Trap with. I think it's called The Funhouse.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah,
that's on the list too. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. After not recording a Screams After Midnight for a week or two, Tim was back this week, and we got Night Swim done, which was. I
feel that was a movie that was specifically designed to irritate you. Like you didn't hate it, but you're just like, they could have done so many different things.
Yeah, not good. And then Late Night with the Devil, which I was very much looking forward to. It is good, but I do have faults. I think the ending's bad.
Okay, we'll talk off because I don't want to step on your review of it. Because I just rewatched it at home with the wife. And it is definitely a different in the theater versus at home viewing. But yeah, we'll talk about that off because I really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah. But yeah, so a busy week. Nothing super exciting to report necessarily, but
so maybe new news did break while we were talking, but there's nothing.
You were hoping in the first 10 minutes that
well, just maybe you might have missed something or whatever, but there's really nothing.
I've never missed anything in my life, Matt. Okay, it's never been a mistake.
Pete, I figure you weren't good in sports, so you've definitely missed a catch before.
No, I don't think that happened.
You don't think so?
No.
Someone didn't throw a cricket ball at you, and you just completely whiffed on it.
I don't think you throw. Well, yeah, I suppose you throw cricket balls if you're the baseman. Not that you call cricket players basemen, but you know what I mean in comparison to baseball.
Yeah.
I was going to say though, but I suppose they still pass. I suppose you just pass with your feet.
Still when they catch it in the field, they still got to throw it. I feel like the overs.
When you said catch a pass, I'm like, you're thinking of American football, and I'm like, we didn't do American football when I was in PE in school because we did every other American sport. We did basketball. We did. I think we did softball rather than baseball, but same difference.
Yeah. No more, just more people in the field. Different type of pitch, but yeah. But you guys had to have done rugby, right?
We never did actually. Never did rugby.
Really? Because you don't throw it forward in rugby, but there are definitely passes. You pitch it back and whatnot.
I don't know why we didn't do rugby. I guess maybe they just thought it was too violent.
too rough for you guys. Yeah, I get that. It's hard to play touch rugby. Like you can play flag football.
Well, we did field hockey. Not ice hockey, Matt. I know that's your favorite, but we didn't have an ice rink, so.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get the field hockey, little weird sticks that I don't know if I could play that. Too much running.
In fact, I snapped one of those sticks in half.
Dang!
I had the ball so hard it just snapped in half.
Dang! Look at you.
Yeah.
That's in hockey. That's like a real clapper right there. You get like the snapshot or the slap shot. They load up, and sometimes it breaks the stick.
So I never played again. I thought I've peaked. There's no point in ever even touching this sport ever again.
I'm the strongest man alive. I'm not playing for their safety.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
At 13 years old, that was the choice I made. Is that I'm too dangerous to be on the field.
Smart. I get that. That's why some people don't do MMA, because they're too dangerous. They're, you don't want to see them in a street fight.
Well, look, there's a reason why Chuck Norris is not in the MMA. Okay.
Yeah, that's the same reason. Same reason why you don't play field hockey. I get it.
Exactly.
Pete is the Chuck Norris of field hockey.
Whoa. All right.
That's a T-shirt. Let's get on that.
That's okay. Anyway, let's move on. I feel like I had something else I was going to throw in there, but we went off track because you took me on a tangent of
That's my specialty. That's my specialty. I feel like if Max Mercury is the Zen master of like the Speed Force, I guess I'm the Impulse. I just we'll go off on tangents and we'll dance around, and I just love the Flash family.
Yeah. Well, we can look at the ComiXology top 10, or the list formerly known as the ComiXology top 10.
I really thought I could put the seed in there, and you're gonna we're gonna start comics. But no, you're too much of a machine.
If we were starting with Flash, maybe you could have got me to try and segue, but we weren't, so...
I know.
It wasn't happening.
It was worth a shot.
So, let's choose the first.
Yeah.
We'll see how many single issues there was to even fill out a potential top 10 here. What's your guess for number 1?
Detective Comics.
It was Detective Comics. So, fancy that. Number 2 was Batman Dark Age. Number 3 was Green Arrow. Number 4 was The Flash. Number 5 was Batman Brave and the Bold. 6 was The Penguin. 7 was Power Girl. 8 is Harley Quinn. 9 is The Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing, which is a collection. And then 10 is Primer issue 2. Do you know, I was watching, not to tangent immediately, but I was watching Return of the Pink Panther Returns, or Return of the Pink Panther, whatever the way the title is, this week. Because I watched the first 2 a couple of months ago, and I was like, oh, I want to go back and watch that. And at some point, someone said Primer, but they pronounced it Primer, and I was triggered. I was so triggered by this posh pronunciation. I was like, how dare you?
So, you remember the time travel movie that came out like 15 years ago at this point?
Aye, Primer.
Yeah, people call it Primer. And it drives me nuts.
No.
So I thought that was just a me thing. I didn't realize this was an actual pronunciation. I thought that like part of the infuriating parts of that movie were them going, actually it's pronounced Primer.
It's just some stupid old English pronunciation of the word, I think. I don't know. But it's just like English people who say a beta test instead of a beta test. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Stop it. And while we're at it, it's GIF, not GIF. Piss off. I'm not listening to it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway. All right, Wednesday. Let's look at Wednesday's books. Any guesses for number 1?
The other books, I didn't even have those loaded, so I don't know. I didn't make it into the shop this week either because of busyness. So usually that's where I jump from. So as I click over, there's some Spider-Man. There's a Wolverine book. But is there anything with that? Oh, there is. Let me go with Rise of Powers of X.
That is incorrect.
Oh, my cheat code failed me. Is it? Let's see. It's not Ultimate Spider-Man 4, is it?
It is.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Yep, that's number 1. Number 2 is Rise of the Powers of X.
Yeah.
Number 3 is X-Men Forever. 4 is Avengers. 5 is Wolverine. Number 6 is Gods, which is the Hickman Marvel book. And then number 7 is Duke, issue 5, which I think is a G.I. Joe thing.
It is. It's the Williamson relaunch stuff.
Yep, never heard of Duke, but that's fine.
He's the main guy in G.I. Joe. So did you see the Rise of Cobra movie all those years ago?
Nope.
Okay, so that's the Channing Tatum character, is Duke.
Oh, okay. Number 8 is Amazing Spider-Man. Number 9 is Daredevil. And number 10 is Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. So yeah, a lot more Marvel books out this week. So they had a full slate in that top 10.
Oh, there's Creature from the Black Lagoon came out. It's the Dan Watters.
Oh,
Part of
yeah.
that Universal. I'm gonna have to go this week. Hopefully they got enough.
That is number 12 for the record
Okay.
here. The highest non-Marvel book, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Good.
TMNT 150 is at number 14, so it's nice to see that runs or not run, but that series, that lineage is, it started in 2011, it's literally still going today, with issue 150 still.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny actually because some of the Rebirth books are sort of around that numbering or getting close to it, like Batman. But the only reason why they're even close to that is because they were double shipping for an extended period. So it's kind of wild that this Turtles book has just been consistently monthly since 2011 for 13 years, and that's where we are now. So, yeah. Although this isn't actually is it 150? Because it says Road to 150 at the top. No, it is 150. It says the Road to 150 ends here, so it is issue 150. Okay.
Nice.
Anyway, that's the top 10s from Tuesday and Wednesday, digitally speaking, as of right now. So that is dive into the books, I guess. We can get going. We have first up Detective Comics 1084, Ram V writing with Javier Fernández on the art. So this is Bruce back in Gotham, which we sort of saw the first moment of last issue, but this is kind of mainly taking that from there. There is a little bit of a flashback subplot to when he first sort of got recuperated in the desert. He kind of spends a romantic night with Talia in a tent and learns a couple of things, but most of the plot is in Gotham when he arrives back. And I will say, first up, this Fernandez art is very good. I love this first page of just like the bats coming in and like both Gordon and the Question looking up and being like, oh, like he's here, like he's came home. So really good couple of first pages to really set the mood, I thought. Like that.
Yeah, I agree, because it was almost like a sense of wonder, like with Gordon there at the top. So that's really nice. And then I also like how, typically a Bat book's real dark, but there's a lot of yellows in these first bunch of pages. So it gives it a whole different vibe than what we've seen.
Well, I think that's also going into what they talk about throughout the book, which is that the city is actually brighter than it was before he left, because the Organs have built new buildings, and they're they've effectively cleaned up the city, but they've done it at this cost where they've just abandoned and gotten rid of anything that's undesirable.
Yeah, they've gentrified Gotham.
And that's what some of the speech between Gordon and Batman gets into a little bit later on. But yeah, so one of the Asthma monsters shows up, and Batman's got some sonic devices to take care of it. But yeah, I mean, the heart of this was just some of these small moments here where either Batman or Gordon were kind of smirking because they're just kind of happy to have each other back, kind of thing.
Well, and it really felt like the relationship between Jim and Bruce, this is the strongest it's been, right? Since Ram V's been writing it, and it feels real natural, right? Because at the beginning when V was writing, it was Batman was in this kind of like an identity crisis, right? He's having panic attacks. He has his guard up constantly. Yet now he's, not that he's better, but he's come back with a new sense of purpose. And it just feels like, almost like he wanted to hug Jim, but he's got to keep it professional. So I thought that was conveyed really well through the art.
Yeah. And we get the flashbacks. And even in the flashbacks, he's Bruce is kind of smiling a little bit here or there, just to sort of give it a different vibe. Like he's really kind of refreshed after that whole voyage in the desert. But he ends up sneaking in to see what Talia's got in a crate, and it's actually the dead body of Arzen. And he is like, why do we have this? What's going on? And Talia mentions she got a friend to smuggle it out, which is Lady Shiva, which comes up in the backup, which we'll get to later. But basically she's planning on bringing him back with a Lazarus pit, and Bruce is a bit critical of that. He's like, oh, is that really a good idea? He's like, well, in a way, I kind of did that with you. He's like, that's not the same. No. You didn't put me in a Lazarus pit.
Yeah, no Lazarus madness for him. He had a sweat lodge type experience where he got to connect to his inner self. Arzen's really coming back from the dead, and whatnot. But I'm wondering how this would affect with the whole, we know the whole backstory between Roz, right, and Arzen's dad, and what this would do with Arzen, you know. But yeah, so I like the long-term storytelling implications there. But just this whole stuff with Bruce and Talia, where he's like, "You're not gonna do what I think you're gonna do," and she's like, "Oh, and how?"
Yeah, and the reason why she's doing this is that she basically made a promise to Arzen because he helped save Bruce, like he helped save Batman, and this was the deal she kind of made, is that she'd bring him back. So it's going to be very interesting, given that he was willing to try and help Batman at the very end of his life, at least so far anyway. Obviously, make it more life in a bit. It does suggest that there might be a different and interesting dynamic once he is back. If he does come back and he's back in the city, does he go against his mother? Because after all, his mother did kill him. Like, that was
right. But if he suspected, like, if he made the deal with Talia, knowing like, oh, mom's gonna kill me, right? This is part of the calculation, too, you know. Or is this just to get closer to the Al Ghuls, right? You know, well, I don't know what the Orgum's plans are, how far-reaching they are, because it seems like later in the book they want to do this to other cities, you know, and it's kind of steps on what Roz was doing. They're just doing it in a different way.
Wait, so you're suggesting that this is still part of the plan that the family wants, and not just him acting on his own?
Yeah, maybe he did go rogue to save Batman, but I mean, I don't know what Mama Orgum's exact plans are, but you would think like she'd want to take the, you know, Al Ghul and the League of Assassins off the table.
I feel like her choice to kill her son, though, didn't come from like this is part of the plan. Like, it seemed like it was shocking to him.
That's true too.
And maybe, I mean, don't get me wrong, he made this deal with Talia, so maybe he predicted that he'd be found out and she'd kill him for it. But it didn't feel like, oh, we're like, it still felt like he was being murdered, as opposed to, oh, we agreed that you'll die for the sake of. It's not like anyone was there to witness it, right? There was no witnesses to be like, oh, to make sure it looks legit, so that Talia will come and help you afterwards, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, who knows where they're going to go with that? I suspect there will probably be something between him and his mother, especially given we saw how she kind of raised him in the flashbacks, and how she kind of like beat some of the morals out of him and toughened them up. Like, maybe there'll be kind of a consequence to that, and that's another big theme of this issue, is the consequences. That's what Batman says to the others. He's like, I'm going to go and be the consequence of what this is, like, what they've done. So he says there's actually a really cool transition page between the flashback and the back to the present day stuff, because he says it to Talia as he's leaving, and the sun's rising, and then it sort of transitions to Gotham now, where the sun's also rising, and he's saying to Gordon on the rooftop, change without consequence is a lie. So it kind of continues the theming of what he was saying to Talia down into the conversation with Gordon. It's really nice.
Yeah. And it kind of fits in with that Ram V storytelling motif of like magic has a cost, right? And so this reality engine, for lack of a better term, right, is kind of like deep magic. And so part of that is like, yeah, you can try to make people forget about Batman, but as long as there's a couple people that still believe, Batman can never die. And it's funny that you kept, you know, referring to like these big moments of Batman returning to Gotham, like in The Dark Knight Rises. Like, you're like, oh, The Dark Knight Rises has a real, and then this kind of apes that. When Batman makes himself known. There's
a specific moment, it's very similar to Dark Knight Rises later on. But Batman's kind of like struggling to like define, like, you know, do I still have a place here? Like, you know, what is my purpose in this Gotham that's changed? And it's actually Gordon who gives him this pep talk here, and talks about how there was this, you know, this juvenile center. He had a case for these missing kids, but it was a kid who had a bit of a record. He'd been in and out of juvie, even though he hadn't even turned 17 yet. And he basically says this new version of the city has abandoned this. They're building over. They're putting something else in instead of like this center for kids. And it's this idea that Gordon and Batman as well is like, you know, when we try to save Gotham, we try to save everyone in it. Whereas this new version of Gotham that the Orgums have built is about only serving a set type of people. And even then, when the Orgums are talking later on, when the Mummy Orgum is making her speech, she's like, oh, like, they basically handed us the city because we made them feel safe. She basically admits that it's an illusion. They're not really safe, but we make them think they feel safe, and because of that, they hand over all this power and donations, and they let us just take over. So,
and it's a false sense of security too, because the city's not actually any more safer, as we've seen, you know, with Batgirl taking out people, right? It's just people aren't talking about it as much. It's not in the forefront of what is Gotham, you know? So it's that old Ben Franklin quote that those who would give up liberty for security deserve neither, right? So it's like, what exactly have the people of Gotham given up, you know, in order to have this, what they think is a better version?
Yeah, he's like, you ask what to stand for, old friend. Maybe sometimes it's more important to stand opposed. And Batman smiles and says, "Thank you, Jim." And then Jim starts saying some other things, and then looks up, and Batman's gone. And there's just a little bit of a smile that he's like, "Oh, he got me." It feels good for him to disappear once again.
We're doing our thing again.
Yeah. Nah, that was all very sweet. And obviously, whilst Mummy Orgham's making her big speech, and she's looking out at the city, Batman's in another building prepping something, and we see some blips, and then we get our big Dark Knight Rises bat logo made of fire on a building. Or in this case, it's more specifically, he's blown out the glass, so there's literally a bat-shaped hole on the side of a building. It's very good. It's very good.
What I like about Fernandez's art here too is like it's almost like we're seeing Mama Orgham's true form, right? Because she's not this put together woman, you know, of nobility. You really see the wrinkles and age in her face, you know. So it gives her, you know, kind of almost a monstrous look. And so when the explosion goes off and we get the reflection, you know, she's standing there looking like a monster. I thought that was really effective.
Yeah, it's also notable that she's basically talking to some of the organized criminals of Gotham. You see Black Mask. You see, what's the casino lady's name again? Roulette. Thank you. And a couple others, and she's basically making this pitch to them, and she's saying, "Oh, like, you know, nothing stands against us." You know, she specifically she starts talking about how they've got this blueprint that they can now duplicate in other cities, and then Batman does his whole thing. The explosion happens, and they're looking out at this burning bat symbol, and one of the gangsters just says, "It appears, Miss Orgham, that your blueprint is on fire." Almost like this is just single-handedly given like a no confidence to everyone she was just talking to. It's really good stuff, especially since the light, and this is also in the art, is the light of the bat symbol is lighting up Orgham here. And what's good about that is, like you were saying, it kind of like accentuates her. It's almost like, you know, he's literally shining a light on who she is and exposing her for her faults, and this idea that, you know, Batman's not gone. You thought you killed him, but he's not. So no, that was really good. Then Batman talks to Catwoman, which was an interesting little mood to this scene because of the Talia scene before. I was like, you know, Catwoman's the one that orchestrated saving your ass, and it's actually kind of funny in hindsight now that you had a little like one night fling with Talia, and now you're sitting all awkwardly on a roof with Catwoman.
Yeah, well, that's why he's awkward, because she's like, "Oh, she's gonna know what I did." Like, they're not married, you know. So
true, but I mean,
you know. They might as well be.
They are lovers, and she just risked everything to save his life. I feel like that earns at least a bit of a grace period before he starts bonking other chicks.
His ex, It's
his
not
ex,
just any other chick, too. It's his ex, Which I thought that was a different thing, but, you know.
Like, any oasis in a desert, literally, in this case. I get it.
I was about to say that, but I was like, that's too on the nose. So...
No. But he's all like, "I'm not the same man who went into the desert," and she's like, "Oh, is that maybe comforting?" So the cliffhanger at the end of this issue is she's basically saying, like, "Never again. I will never let that happen again." And she goes to the Joker. That is the cliffhanger of this issue. She goes to see the Joker, and this is something that we've been saying ever since the first arc of this run. Is this idea of the Orghams infecting Gotham and even taking it away from the villains? And this entire time, the Joker's kind of been this, like, off-camera, like, idea. It's like, well, what's the Joker going to say about all this? And, like, is the Joker just been chilling as Gotham's been changing? It feels like he would want to get involved. And it's almost something really interesting about Selina going to, I wouldn't say enlist the help of Joker, but maybe try and inspire Joker to create some chaos, because it'll battle what the you know, this bastardized, like, fake version of Gotham that's been built. It's like, no, for all the awful that some of these villains are, they are part of Gotham, and that's truly what it is.
It's the MJF thing. He's a scumbag, but he's our scumbag. And like Gotham's a POS, but it's our POS.
Oh dear.
I had always wondered too about Nolan, right? About The Dark Knight Rises. Like, given that Heath hadn't died, what was Joker doing when Bane had taken over the city, right? And so I'm curious to see how Ram V does that here.
I think he's in prison, but there's a part of that movie where Bane releases a bunch of prisoners. I suspect that'd be when Joker would like get out into the world again. Yeah, I have often also wondered how you fit Joker. I mean, I'm sure some other things were added, so it's hard to say what you take out to like fit him in. But
from what I remember reading about the novelization is they'd said that there was a gang of people going around and thwarting Bane's men, and they can't prove, but they hear sinister laughter, and they just kind of left it at that. And so he was like going around doing his own thing still.
Yeah, but who's to say if that was the plan originally, if he was going to be in the movie, though?
But here, I feel like Ram V's addressing it here with, I feel like we're going to see what Joker has been, not what he's been up to, but how he reacts to the Orgums and their, their fake security and order.
I am genuinely curious what Joker's reaction is to that. Like, how does he feel about this city being taken over by the Orgums? It feels like he would have something to say about it. Yeah. So, he doesn't
play well with others, right? Like,
no.
He doesn't have alliances even with the own Bat villains, right? Anytime there's a big event, like when Luthor tries to recruit people, he never recruits Joker because Joker's too much of a wild card, right? And so here, all I can think of is the Rage Against the Machine song where he's like, F you, I won't do what you tell me. And I want to see how that works out with like with the asthma and the, because seeing that hulking brute show up behind Batman, you know what I mean? I want to know how Joker would respond to something like that.
Yeah. Well, this is an example of where the character is so well defined that the excitement here is instant because it's like, okay, what does he think of all this stuff going on? As opposed to him being shoved down our throats, like the entire like story, like say another Batman book that's going on right now, and just wanting to be rid of him. Whereas this was exciting to even see him because it was like, okay, not only is this part of Selina's like doing her plan to try and like make a difference and help, but it's like, no, I'm actually excited about how the Joker is going to fit into this now. So, very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's like one of those things, like, did the Orgums even account for Joker? Were they so prideful about, like, well, if we get rid of Batman, that'll give us our inroads? And they're like,
hey, that could be part of it. Maybe the reason why he's been lying low, like, this past month or whatever it's been, is because without Batman, what is Joker? Like, is he like, just too depressed to... Because that was like in Dark Knight Returns, right? He just sat like a zombie until he heard Batman was back, and he's like, hello, beautiful, or darling, or whatever the line was.
Yeah.
So, they could play with that. They could play with this idea that until Batman was back, he didn't give a shit. But now they could almost do a moment here where you do a little flashback where he sees the flaming Bat logo in the building and like smiles and is like...
The biggest smile, right? Like,
it's like, oh, the game is afoot again, kind of thing.
Almost ape the Bat logo, right? But with a big smile on there, like an extreme close up. Yeah, because that is one of the things. Like, as much as we talk about Joker fatigue, when he's used right, it really is hard to argue about like him and Batman's relationship being as iconic as it gets.
He's the perfect arch nemesis. I don't know if there's a more perfect arch nemesis to a hero than Joker is to Batman. There's there's obviously lots of great ones, but I don't know if any are as perfect as Joker to Batman.
Yeah, and it's like when used properly, like here, and even here, we get his voice, but really the only part of him that we see is that smile, right? And so it's there's enough restraint here that when we do finally see Joker, it's going to feel meaningful. Yeah.
So, no, very cool. So the backup here, which I did read this time, because, I just happened to look at it. I was like, oh, the art looks all right. And then I noticed Cass, and I was like, oh, okay, right, let me see what's going on here. So yeah, this is basically, whilst Batman was gone, Cassandra Cain, Batgirl, is still trying to, remind everyone that Batman in some form still exists. And it's quite interesting, actually, because, like, one, I like it in the art. There's these little narration boxes for when she's hitting the bad guys that are basically just like how she's interpreting this, because we always talk about how Cass learned how to fight, and that was her first language before actual spoken language was. So her narration is literally just the bones she's breaking as she's like breaking the bones in their bodies, which is kind of cool. But this idea of her like trying to keep the idea of Batman alive single-handedly comes up because she's like, she's watching these villains, they're moving the crate, and it turns out to be Lady Shiva moving the crate with Arzen out of Gotham. And she notices Cass is watching, and they have this conversation. When they start fighting, because Cass tries to stop her, she's like, "You're fighting like you're a foot taller than you are. You're fighting like you've got more muscles than you have. Despite the fact that you're one of the world's best fighters, you're trying to fight like him because you're trying to fill the role that's now missing because Batman's not here," and criticizes her for it. And I thought that was a really interesting idea because I was just like, because obviously Cass is a great fighter, right? She's one of the best that there is in terms of like someone without powers. And the idea that she's actually maybe putting herself at risk because she's trying to alter her style for a body that she literally does not have is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. Like in wrestling, when you have a small guy trying to wrestle like a big guy, it's not going to end up well for him, right? Because you got to go to your, what makes you work, right? Yeah. Just like Batman couldn't fight like Cass, So I dove like that, and coming from Lady Shiva, who that's kind of her thing, right? Is looking over people's fighting styles and knowing where to find the weaknesses. Her pointing that out, that was a real smart piece of storytelling.
Yeah. And the art even does a couple of, because when the asthma monsters show up, Cass stands up and she looks like Batman. Like they do that whole silhouette thing where you can just see the eyes and like the capes coming down. It looks like Batman standing there. So even the art's kind of helping this idea that she's trying to just emulate him, which, I think it speaks to this idea that Cass really cares about the bat symbol and being part of that family because she found a home with it, and she's always kind of cared about upholding that. So seeing her desperately try to sort of keep it alive and Batman's not there is really good. And that's partly why the flaming symbol on the side of the building is such a good uplifting moment in the main story, is because it's like, no, this idea of like, no, he's going to remind the city, he's going to remind them that there's hope, that like this won't stay the way it is. So they fight the monsters. It's fun, and that's basically it.
And the realization that Cass has is she keeps trying to fight like Batman against these asthma. She remembers her training from her dad, right? That's what that is in the back. She says a curriculum of pain followed by silence, and then it remembers what makes her her. So she starts fighting more like Cassandra Cain, and that's how they end up taking out the monsters with her mom. Well, her mom gets on the boat anyways. So, but yeah, really, really good. I really love the art here. The Robbie Rodriguez.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it
looks like with the coloring too, with a lot of purples. It matches Cass's vibe a lot.
Yeah, honestly, like, reading this, I really enjoyed it, and it made me just want a Cass book. I'm like, I mean, obviously she's in Birds of Prey, which is great. We still get to see her on a regular basis, but I'm like, man, like I just want a Cass book now.
Maybe just a mini, like her showing up in, what was that, Spirit World? Like that was fine, but I want her doing this stuff. I want her going and kicking bad guys in the teeth.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take it ongoing. Like she had an ongoing. She got like 60 issues or something like an ongoing back in the 2000s. It'd be nice to have that again for these types of characters.
Isn't it crazy? We've had 3 Batgirls, and they've all had their own, at least for a short time, they have their own series.
What's actually weirder about it is that Barbara's own series all came like last because because all of her time as Batgirl was back in the days when there wasn't a Batgirl book, but now, so Cass actually was the first Batgirl to get an ongoing, funnily enough. It's just kind of a weird how it's worked out that way. So Backup was great. I loved it. It was exactly the type of little perfect slice of character that I enjoy in a Backup. So, what are you rating, Matt, of Detective Comics?
So the art on both of them were nice and crisp. The storytelling was fantastic. I'm gonna give this a 9.
Yeah, I really liked the art in both, but especially the main story. I think the way it kind of handled the idea of the sort of almost angelic look to the city that Batman's coming back to, but it's kind of fake, so that they're trying to actually turn it back to the way it was before. And I think the layouts are really good. When he's fighting the first big guy early on, there's a great little moment where like he's looking up at him at the monster, and there's like a sort of rectangle that's drawn just on top of the art. It's not like a separate panel. It's just drawn on top of the art, and it connects the eye line of Batman and the big guy, and it's just kind of like, it just gives you this sense of like, oh, they're staring at each other. This is the stare down before they fight. Or later on, when the explosion happens that makes the big bat symbol, something as simple as the 3 panels on that page just being all kind of tilted to give the idea of a rumble. Like, just little things like that, just give it enough of a vibe and atmosphere. It felt like Fernández was really cooking a lot of atmosphere to add to the story that was happening. And all the Batman Gordon stuff was super cool. Backup was super fun. I think I'm just going to go and nudge lower and say 8.5.
Okay.
But I think that's just because I would say that it doesn't... I wouldn't say the main story feels like it has a beginning, middle, and end so much as it just has lots of things that were advancing the story. So that'd be why.
Gotcha. So I looked up Javier Fernández. I'm like, I know this name, and he did a lot of Nightwing and Detective Comics back.
We've seen a lot of Fernández before.
Yeah. So I was like, oh yeah. So feels right at home in Gotham.
He's been a regular artist since the start of Rebirth, really. Maybe he's had a bit of a break, but like he was there a lot early on. The Flash, issue 8, Legacy 808, Cy Spurrier writing with Ramon, Perez, and Vasco Georgiev on the art. So, yeah, this book's still weird and confusing.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed pretty straightforward, this issue, for like most of it, and then the last like 5 pages just kind of put it into a whirlwind of like, wait, what's happening now? Who's this? Who are these people? So, it's all framed around Iris is doing like a radio show. She's like being interviewed on a radio thing that's about superheroes, and she's talking about how the superheroes are necessary and how they're doing great things, and that this cynical take that they're causing more harm than good is just a bunch of bullshit, basically. And that's what the framing device of the book. And as she's talking, we see Barry and some of the other speedsters like going around saving people. There's like, and it's basically all stuff that's being caused by like reality starting to kind of break down because of what's going on with Wally and the other stuff.
The Speed Force, they're basically like Speed Force incursions, right? So there's like fires popping up out of nowhere in Nepal, and like just this weird flat spots in other cities. And so the Flash family's running around trying to help, including the new guy, Circuit Breaker, which is, I think, the first time that we really had him in the main book.
Well, he popped up at the end of the last issue, but yeah, this is... Yeah, he's not been in Ethan main in a while.
Yeah. The cool thing I did like, though, is like being that he's tapped into the Speed Force, or the Stealth Force, not the Speed Force, he couldn't see all the other Flashes running around. So as Barry's talking, it seems like he's talking to nobody, but he's directing traffic to the other Flashes. I thought that was a pretty cool perspective.
Yeah. It was a great 2-page spread at one point where you just see all the different lines of like the different color lines of like the different speedsters moving around. So you got like the pink for Avery, you've got blue or red for Jesse, and you know. So it like that was fun. Perhaps more interestingly, we had stuff with Amanda Waller going in and like basically raiding Terrifitech for stuff. Meanwhile, we've got Dr. Pilgrim, or Inspector Pilgrim, sorry, from the future, who again seems to know a lot about where things are in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So my theory that that's the new Baby West is still that's still what I think. Yeah.
Well, and he's showing Jay how to do that energy shaping, right? So what we thought was this thing that, you know, when he was creating all those little creatures, turns out that's just he's manipulating energy, kind of like how he already was. It's just he's being able to focus it like a Green Lantern, which is a pretty cool different version of the Speed Force than we've seen. Yeah.
So yeah, you get that great page with all different colors, and then just generally the speedsters sort of helping and save people. Irie ends up calling Barry, and everyone just seems to think Wally's maybe away on Titan's business, although we know he's not. In fact, the Titans book even said a note in the last issue saying, "Oh, he's not here right now because of what's going on in Flash." So,
right, but I like to think that the Titans think that he's doing Flash business, the Flash thinks he's doing Titans business, but meanwhile, he's in his Zen garden just chilling the hell out from everybody. I'm kind of jealous of him.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem like a good thing, though. It feels more like It
It's
feels
a bit
more like,
sinister.
it's more like an alcoholic who's returned to the bottle rather than.
Well, if you want to make it that dark, or it's somebody that's just ignoring their responsibilities, you know.
Yeah, but that's what I'm getting at. It's
Yeah.
like this sort of like, this negative thing where he's just like
Mhm.
completely broken down and
Yeah.
isn't there for anyone
Well,
else.
do you feel like that's more sinister, like that the whole idea of that garden, that Zen garden, and whatever? You think this is part of the Crown of Thorns part, is to take Wally off the board, or do you think this is something that's completely, you know, not separate because it's part of the same story? But do you think this is part of? Because I'm feeling it's more sinister. Like they have him off the board, knowing like what he means to the Flash family. Like he's kind of the, pardon the pun here, the keystone of it, and that without Wally, it's easier for the Crown of Thorns, to put their stuff into play, right? Because as we see, Barry's still getting attacked by them, all right, mentally, and so he's not working at 100%. So there's a lot of balls in the air here. Spurrier has a lot of things going on.
Yeah. So I raised Colin Barry though to basically say that she's like tracking like Barry and the other speedsters going around, and they keep like the paths keep crossing in the same locations. It's almost like you're about to be ambushed, and of course, sure enough, we get these like characters in these outfits. I actually almost thought it was more characters like Inspector Pilgrim for a second because of the white heads, but I don't think it is. They look kind of different to me, at least at a distance.
Well, no, because they say it's a chrono hemorrhage. Deploy a widow to stitch the rift. So it feels like they're coming from another dimension that he's from, and they're trying to take matters. They're almost like the time police.
But is he? Are they wearing the same outfits? Because they didn't know what they are to me.
They're very similar because they're both wearing the tall, round hats. And we know that they think of the Flash as problems because of that's why Pilgrim's kind of going off and trying to help in his own way. At least that's how I'm interpreting it all.
It's just because the like I keep saying Inspector Pilgrim has more of like just a coat and then like a hat. Whereas these guys, it looks like there's a lot more to their outfits. But again, they're very small in the panel, admittedly.
Yeah. Well, it could be like they're the SWAT team and he's the detective, right? Like, they're going to be geared up for different things.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Because they end up they end up getting smushed by 2D Man, right? So, they're not on the same side. They're almost collateral here.
Yeah, you got to do... This is where it all just completely falls into like chaos. So basically this team of villains that were approached before to stand against the Flash are here. You got Mirror Master and some of the others. Grodd obviously is the one sort of messing with Barry's head with his fancy helmet and all that, and basically holds Barry kind of in, I don't want to say a trance per se, but like he's kind of like just, I don't even know. What is he doing to him?
Well, it's a psychic attack. He's holding him like, he's overwhelming his senses, with his telepathy.
Telepathy, yes.
Yes.
The telepathy.
Telepathy.
Telepathy, yeah. That's not the word.
It's one of those fun words. The more you say it, the less it means, and then you start to think you're saying it wrong.
Telepathy. Telepathy.
His brain, it's a psychic attack. It's his psychic powers.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get that he's a psychic attack. It just, I was a little unclear exactly like what he was doing. But part of this is there's so much goddamn things going on here. It's kind of nuts. The big thing that happens though outside of the crazy speedster stuff, where he's getting attacked by the villains, which have been put together by Thawne, right? That was the whole thing to set up. Is that Amanda Waller calls into the radio show and asks a question under the name Mandy. But then she shows up at the station and says they're shutting this thing down. She puts a message out over the air, and she says they're shutting it down because they're being charged with spreading or aiding like domestic terrorism. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? And she's like, hey, we've discovered things at Terrifitech that speedsters, when they use their powers, are actually causing all these weird like anomalies that are happening. They're every time they use their powers, they're taking something from the planet and from like existence, and it's going to ruin everything. And then the phone call specifically, she compared it to cowboys, right, or like miners, and like, oh, they just thought, oh, we'll just go for the gold, or we'll go for the oil. It was the black gold, the oil. And basically didn't think about anything other than the fact that this is going to make them a bunch of money. And then fast forward 100 or so years later, and we've got climate problems because everyone's been using oil and burning fossil fuels and whatever else. So it's like, that's kind of what the speedsters have been doing with the Speed Force, is they've been tapping into something they don't really understand, and it's having an effect. Now, obviously, I expect we're still going to have a flashback after this run, so I suppose we're going to learn that it's not quite true, and that it's actually Thawne that's up to something, or it's these other beings that we've been introduced to that are causing all this.
The stillness, or the archangels, or... Yeah.
So at one point in this book, they mentioned the archangels, or sorry, the archangels, not angels, archangels, and I went, oh yeah, they're a thing. I forgot about that name because I saw I did a double take, like they made a typo, and I'm like, oh no, it was them. I remember this now. I mean, honestly, the more this goes, this book is getting harder and harder to like keep track of and like remember all the things they've introduced, and so I do think it's a bit messy. There's definitely some interesting ideas in here for sure.
Yeah, I really love what Waller says though about that. About, you found this natural resource, and then we exploited it to the point, right? But it's not just the miners, right? It was the fact that the oil companies came along, and then they started pushing stuff, and so it's not just as simple as, oh, they found oil, they exploited it. It was certain interests of doing it. But the way that she's able to, she accuses them of spreading propaganda, but that's exactly what Amanda Waller is.
I do appreciate in the art that Waller has a shit-eating grin on her face as she gets to tell Iris speedsters are the ones causing all this. They're the worst of all the superheroes because they're actually damaging reality itself. I like that because she thinks she's got such a smoking gun, and it's just like the happiness on her face is just evil, basically. Yeah.
Well, and then I like too that this naturally just plays into what absolute power is going to be, right? From what we know from the solicits.
That's true.
But it feels natural in the story, right? Because of course, if Terrific had found out that the speedsters are killing reality, Waller's going to find out sooner than later, right? She has her hand in everything. So,
the end of the issue, Barry's still kind of frozen on his knees from the psychic attack, and he's like, Wally, where are you? We need you. And we just get one panel of Wally in the Zen garden, and it looks like Bart has been turned to stone by Misty Lady, whatever her name was, I forget.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of weird... It's a weird book, it definitely is. Like some issues I do find things to like in it quite a bit, and then there's other issues that just feel like a bit more like a really weird and hard time to read. This was like straightforward enough, but goddamn that last, like as soon as the villains showed up and all hell started breaking loose, it felt like I'm like, okay, there's like a lot going on again, and I need to try and keep track of all this.
It starts to get almost impenetrable. Because there's so much going on, and like you have those, I'll call them time cops getting folded into 2D, and you're like, okay, well, they're not stopping the incursion. Like, what is going on here? And then
this is one of these books where it feels like you're supposed to reread every previous issue every single month before the new one, just so you can actually follow.
Sorry, I don't have that kind of time, friend.
No.
So However, like you said, like it is straightforward enough. That said, I thought Iris's voice was a little bit off. The whole, they're trying to make her as what they call her, the corn belt Lois Lane. Yeah. And whatnot.
I did like her little dig at Lois, though. She sort of, she makes a little crack about how Lois Lane, falls out of a building numerous times and calls it a scoop. I thought it was like a little dig. It was like, of course she gets all the scoops. She's tied to Superman. Yeah.
They're a little bit different, but it's just her voice being a little bit off, but I mean, it's not too distracting than what I'm used to. So it fit the story at least. It wasn't distracting once you got used to it.
Yeah, I will say, as much as I do think the art is solid enough, and there's some nice pages. We talked about the page with all the different colored speedsters running around. Of course, the Waller expressions towards the end. Generally speaking, the art's pretty solid. I still miss the art from before, because the first 6 issues or whatever had
Deodato.
Yeah, that very consistent art style that just had a really cool vibe, and it felt like it was like half the book for me. It really was. Whereas now with it's missing, it feels like the book's identity feels a little bit off.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll see. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really have much to add.
I think we covered it pretty well for being hit over the head with side stuff. I think we were able to form it together, like Jay forming those little energy constructs.
I will say this: when when Peacemaker's leading like the SWAT team or whatever into Terrific to like raid it, and Terrific's not there because he's on Justice Society business. Both Waller and Mr. Terrific are like on a call, and they're both like holograms inside the lobby of Terrific. And I thought to myself, why would the two holograms be like appearing in front of everyone else? Like, wouldn't they just be calling like? Wouldn't there just be one hologram for Terrific of Amanda Waller in front of him and vice versa? Why would there be two holograms for an audience inside the building? I don't know. The logic of that was like, this is just for the visual of the comic book. It doesn't make any sense why this would how the call would work.
Yeah, I guess. It's kind of funny though, seeing that his are the Terrific spheres, but Peacemaker's holding up the hologram. Right? And so it just seems like they're there just so Mr. Terrific and Waller can argue, right? Which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. But anywho, what are you rating the Flash issue 8?
I'll give it a 7.5.
Yeah, I think I have to go a bit lower because I definitely felt by the end that like I'm struggling at times to kind of keep all the different threads aligned in my head here. So I'm going to go with a 6.5 for me on this one. So that's that. All right, where are we going next? Green Arrow issue 11 Legacy 344. Joshua Williamson writing with Sean Isaacs, Eric Gapstur, and Phil Hester on the art. So a lot of artists there, Matt. Is there something?
Yeah, so they shift perspectives, right? So we go from the Arrow family fighting the Justice League to Merlin being revealed as the person behind all of this, to his origin, which is done by Phil Hester, which is nice because I like when they're playing with the time frame that most of the stuff in the past that's happened to Ollie is done by Phil Hester, which is a nice thing. But yeah, so at the end of the last issue, the Justice League was attacking the Arrow family. They all come in to help Ollie because it's not the Justice League, right? It's sanctuaries operating, making the Danger Room constructs. And they end up pulling the sanctuary mask and trying to get it out. Yet when they get out there, Ollie tells Waller, hey, we got what you wanted, now, let my family go. And as he's trying to say this, he ends up disappearing. And you end up finding out that the stuff that Merlin had done in the first arc to make him time travel to keep him away from his family is still in effect. And we get the origin of Malcolm Merlin, and it dips into the Arrow TV show timeline.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so Tommy Merlin shows up here. And Malcolm talks about how he hated that his son was friends with Ollie, and Ollie was everything that he hated because Merlin was able to go from like this performer to almost kind of like a celebrity because of that, and that he tried to provide enough for his son, but then Ollie shows up and is like a bad influence. But that just double downs Merlin on going to train with Ra's al Ghul. And all this stuff looks fantastic by Phil Hester. Like, a character like Ra's al Ghul always, I think, looks cooler when there's these sharp angles on him. And Hester does it. It makes him look more predatory, kind of almost bird-like. And the same with Merlin. So, he talks about that was just a side thing because it allowed him to do the stuff that he liked. And then when Ollie shows up as the Green Arrow, he, is like, oh, I'll train him in the Arrow arts, basically, because Tommy had, followed in his footsteps and became a businessman, but he wasn't doing the kind of field work of business that Merlin was able to do as an assassin, right? He was, doing Wall Street deals, and it was boring. So he lost interest in his son, so he looked at Ollie like a son. But that's where they ended up on opposite sides. And then he went to Waller, and Waller gave him the resources to, lose Ollie through time to prove the lesson of, he's nothing without his family. And then so Ollie ends up in this arrow cave with this cybernetic, almost Eclipso-looking version of Merlin. He has a half cybernetic face with a purple eye. He's wearing the hood, which I think is always a good look with these Archer characters. And he had finally found his way back from where Ollie had left him. And he finally admits that he's the better Archer. That, through all of this time by himself, lost in time, he has realized that Ollie is that guy. But, he's like, well, so I looked at this sanctuary mask and, I see Roy there, but, you weren't here, why? And Ollie admits that he didn't think that he needed it. So, and he's ashamed of that. And he left his family out to dry because he couldn't work on himself. So what does Merlin do now with the sanctuary mask is he creates all of these different versions of the Arrow family. And we get some old looks for Canary and Arsenal and Connor Hawk. I think Shadow's even in there on the page. And they all start fighting Ollie. And so now, instead of last issue, fighting the Justice League, he has to fight his own family. Which now this is just becoming copy and paste storytelling. We get Merlin showing back up and his own personal hatred of Ollie. And what Ollie has done, the jealousy, is what has primed everything. But yeah, I'm sure Williamson will work this back into Waller and her plan for absolute power. Because, outside of Batman, the next biggest hero without powers is Ollie. So I can definitely see her trying to use him as kind of a wedge against the Justice League. Especially since he seems to be on the, not at odds with them, but on the outside right now. But yeah, the art by Hester's pretty great. Isaac's art's fine. It's not as crisp as it has been. And then I guess I would leave the Gapstur and as the almost like a pickup artist. He does the couple odd page here and there. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know how much longer now. I thought we were going to get back to these little 2-issue jaunts of Ollie reconnecting with family members, like the onomatopoeia stuff. That was fun. But yeah, this one was just more time traveling mumbo jumbo, and then you get cybernetic Merlin there at the end and tying into Arrow of all shows. Like Malcolm Merlin was one of the least good things on that show, and there's not a lot of good things, right? So yeah, all said and done, I'll give this a 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to tie into a TV show, it makes sense it would be Arrow, because it is a Green Arrow comic, but...
Yeah, but I don't know, that version of Malcolm Merlin, the whole business guy who's also an assassin, was always, I felt, real stupid. Just make him the Archer dude. I don't know why Ollie needed the rich friends aspect of it. So when we got to Tommy, I was like, oh god, this is a character I forgot even existed. Next, I'll expect Thea. Right? That was his sister, right?
That was the sister, yeah. She had the bloodlust after the Lazarus pit.
Yes. So next we'll see. But hopefully we just have Emmy. Emmy can take that sister role, and just more of her. And it's making me realize too that Ollie's might be. He's not my least favorite member of the Arrow family, but he's certainly not near the top. Feels like a lot of the surrounding characters I find more interesting. Even his son. I like the whole the monk aspect of Connor. So I don't know. Yeah. It is what it is.
All right. Well, the Penguin issue 9, Tom King writing with Rafael de Latorre on the art. So this was the one I was not looking forward to the most, because Detective Comics is great, but definitely more so than Flash. I was looking forward to Penguin, and I think this pretty much delivered. It starts off with this idea that Penguin seemingly has put his team out to plant explosives in a variety of buildings throughout Gotham. The main one of which that we see at the start is the Martha Wayne Daycare Center, a building that Martha Wayne was obviously behind and funded. And the entire issue is basically this idea that Batman simply does not believe the answer that it's the two Penguin siblings that are behind this. He thinks somehow Oswald is behind it. But throughout the entire issue, people keep giving him evidence that suggests that is the truth. But he still thinks it stinks. Something isn't quite right. He knows he's being played.
The detective hunch is just eating at him, but he's like, but I have no proof. And, Batman's the Dark Knight detective. He needs that to be able to follow the logic. So it's eating him alive. I love that internal struggle of Batman throughout this issue.
Yeah, because he's threatening Penguin. He's beating him up. Penguin's, just try to give him the seemingly lie. And then Batman's like, all right, fine, I'll hold you over the side of the building. Now you tell me the truth, or it's the pavement. And what a glorious page. Again, you talk about the warm glow of the city with the yellow lights underneath. Gorgeous page. So we also see Penguin with his wife after this, and she's like, patching him up after Batman has roughed him up. And interesting, she tells a story in her narration about when she first met him, and after they first had sex, where she stank of him, and she went home and had a shower. And it sounds like this really negative story in her head about how she felt after this. But then she said that after she showered for a long time and finally smelled like herself again, she phoned Penguin to come over because she was sick of feeling clean. And it's like, okay, all right. Tom King has somehow made this the dirtiest character, not in like a physically dirty way, in a dirty, sexy way. Kind of thing. And I got a good chuckle out of that. But what I was not expecting later on when she runs into Bruce at the function thing was I never put together that Silver St. Clair was anything to do with her. It never occurred to me.
Well, because it's Silver St. Cloud, because I got hung up on this. As I looked, and I don't know if this is just retroactive, them going and changing, but yeah, I had always known that it was Silver St. Cloud was the socialite, and she's St. Clair. So, yeah. Yeah,
it felt like a reference, so it felt like they were evoking that old character.
I feel that that's definitely what the reference was, but, it's definitely because I Googled Silver St. Clair and nothing came up. Silver St. Cloud did. So it wasn't like it was they changed the name later. Let me just double check here. But regardless of what it is, I do like that, she also was a, she's part of that group of socialites in Gotham, right? Even before Penguin, before she got involved with him.
Yeah. And Silver's a character who's not been in Batman comics for a long ass time. You're going back to the 80s and stuff and 90s to get her as a sort of character that's popping up as a love interest for Bruce occasionally. So even Gordon's like, hey, we looked into this, and the feds are saying they have got a man in the inside at the Iceberg Lounge, and that corroborates the idea that the siblings are behind these bombings. And he's like, this stinks, it doesn't work. And of course, if you had forgotten about it, it reconfirms it for you later that Penguin's doing all this in the behest of the FBI, particularly the one, woman
Agent F.
With the missing eye, because she lost it in Killing Time. And I was like, oh yeah, this is all. So yeah, this whole idea that the feds fed a lie to Jim Gordon and said, hey, what this is going on. They're backing up Penguin's lie to Batman here because they want something from this. And it's all, I don't know. I like that detail. It was like, okay, it's because, and that's why it's all adding up in a way that Batman can't understand, is that there's multiple sources corroborating this lie, which doesn't make sense to him, right? But it does keep reinforcing it.
Right. So logically it makes sense, but it doesn't on the gut check level, right? Which is kind of how Penguin's always operated, is that he's so meticulous, but something always just feels off. right? Because like Batman always knew that his mom just didn't jump, right? Like it didn't add up that she just, she was pushed, but he couldn't prove it. So I like that it ties it back to their history in that way too.
Yeah, and then Black Spider's seen leaving another building that he's blown up, right, for Penguin. And it's actually quite a funny transition because he's like, why did I agree to do this? Did I even ask what this was for? No, I didn't, because it was the Penguin. And then you get to like the next page and he's like, I wake up that night in bed, or he goes to sleep in bed and then he wakes up tied to a tree and there's polar bears around him. And this is Batman's newest interrogation technique, where he's demanding answers, and he's like, well, you can stay with the bears, or you can start talking about what the hell is going on. And everything he tells him, again, further corroborates the story.
Look, I'm not a bear expert, right? But I do love bears, right? And I know this is comic books. However, even the people that handle polar bears don't go in with them at a certain point because they're too unpredictable. Because as being one of the all-time apex predators, polar bears just eat whatever they want, including handlers. So the fact that Bruce would have any control over these things, right, it does almost add a little, Bruce is becoming a bit unhinged. And let alone, one polar bear would have sufficed. He has 4, right?
What I like about this is that he throughout the issue, when we get Bruce's narration, there's a couple of points where he's like, I try not to think of my mother and them like burning her portrait in the building she cared about in this, like, this care center for children. This idea that whoever did this, and he thinks it's Penguin, has desecrated something of his mother's is really sort of struck a chord. Now, admittedly, the bear thing is a bit extreme, but I mean, maybe he's got like some fancy sonic device to knock them out or something, so that there's no danger. I don't know.
Again, this is only something that bothered me, knowing how bears act, and from talking to bear handlers at zoos and at marine parks and whatever. So it does make for a great laugh though, because Black Spider tells him "F you," and he goes, "If you don't talk, I have no reason to stay." And Black Spider's like, "This isn't how you do things. You're all bluff." And he goes, "All right, goodbye." And Bruce turns to walk away, and that's where Black Spider talks, right? So it makes for a fun interrogation scene, And also, when you see the polar bears, you think, "Oh, is this the Penguin tying up loose ends?" And it's like, "Oh no, it's Batman." So that's a nice little swerve too.
Yeah, and then we get Agent F. Well, she's on the Peloton, and she's annoyed that Penguin has called her. And she's swearing left and right. But he wants something from her. And then we get the sort of the gala scene where, Penguin's wife. What's her first name again?
Juice.
Lisa.
It's Lisa Sinclair.
Because I kept wanting to say Silver. It's not Silver. That's a sister.
Yep.
Yeah.
The cousin.
Yeah. She. Sorry, cousin, not sister. Well, that explains the last name difference then.
Right. Well, no, I know that, but for them just to play off the Saint name, right? Saint doesn't mean necessarily that they're related, So I'm just saying, it made me think like, has it always been Silver St. Clair? Have I always just read it wrong?
Yeah.
Or is
See,
it Silver St.
I never had this thought when I read it, but you went on your little rant. I was like, I'll just let him go because I don't remember like having a bit of confusion. But now that we've gotten to the bubble again, it says cousin. I'm like, well, yeah, of course they can have different last names. It's fine.
Yeah. But I just think this, I mean, again, I don't know. They could have just said it like, it doesn't have to be Silver St. Cloud. It's the Saint name, I think, that inspired King to pull that off, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, it's maybe a coincidence that 2 branches of the family have Saint in their name, but whatever. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
They're all rich socialites, so I guess it's more likely.
True.
But yeah, Bruce gets all handsome, and her narration's kind of funny here as well, because she's like, "Oh, like this is like the sort of man that every woman desires," and yet all I can think about is that short, fat bird, and his smells, and his big umbrella. Which a bit of comedy there. But yeah, so no, and she basically is being very observant and is calling out the booze is actually just apple juice. And that this is all just sort of an appearance. It's not really, because she takes his glass, which is the key part of that, is that he's not drinking alcohol. He's just pretending to be. And of course, my mind immediately went back to that cliffhanger where Penguin got the help to figure out who had ordered or who had paid for whatever, and it turned out to be Bruce Wayne. And it made me think, does she know? Like, in this moment, does she know that she's talking to Batman right now? She might.
Right. Well, I also like that it shows how that she's like you said, observant in her own right. So the fact that she sees, oh, he's not drinking like everyone else does, but I almost expected Bruce to respond as like, yeah, well, I'm a recovering alcoholic, to try to make her feel bad. But then I was like, oh no, that's just a trick that I've used to get people off why I don't drink. So it's not very often I project onto Batman.
Yeah. So, and he even kind of questions it. Oh, you really believe that it's the Penguin children that are behind these explosions? And she's like, well, I mean, I don't know. And she just kind of deflects by talking about how strong he is and the apple juice again. But yeah, so Batman makes his way to the Iceberg Lounge. Glorious full-page spread. And this is where he's like reminding himself not to think of his mother because he's just going to get angry. He doesn't want to start off angry. And then the end of the issue is Penguin get what he called the agent for, which is that he wants to see Rita, who he meets in the back of a van. Now, I actually had to go back and remind myself exactly who Rita was because it had been a little while. So this was a big thing in issue 1. This was who he was with in his new life. But in issue 1, he was in love with Rita. And the way that Agent F convinced him to get on board and do everything she wants him to do is they basically made up a bullshit charge that Rita was aiding and abetting him for a lot of his murders, even though they all happened before he met her. And they have arrested her, and they're basically holding her hostage, so Penguin will have to do what they say. So, yeah. So, because he said Rita, right? And I'm like, Rita. That's not ringing a bell here, guys. Rita?
Gotcha.
Who's Rita? And so I was like, okay, I went back and checked, and I was like, okay. I reminded myself of this. I'm glad that they brought her back in now to it's probably a really good time to remind us of the reasons why Penguin was even inspired to do all this in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it is notable that he
becomes a different person when he sees her.
Yeah, he breaks down, and like the last panel is him crying in her lap, and she's holding him. And I think it really contrasts. I kind of skipped over this page earlier on, but there's a scene because there's 2 parts to like Penguin and his ex-wife in bed together, right? There's one where they're just kissing, and she's telling the story in her head of like the first time they had sex. The second time you see them, and it's after they've had sex, she's just saying he always gets like this after. Quiet, and she makes a comment about the smoking and how that's just part of the act, and she's like, who are you? And the final panel of that page is Penguin looking right at the reader, and he just says whack 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 with this kind of smirk in his face, like he's still very much in character. And he contrasts this to the end of the book where he's with Rita and he breaks down into her lap crying. I'm like, this is still an act when he's with the ex-wife. Like, this is he's not really being him anymore. And I think the ending almost implies that everything he's doing, like, obviously this is who he was and he is good at this, but at some level, everything he's doing right now is an act to some extent. And
it's an act of love, though, because he wants to get her out because she's wrapped up in something that's not her fault, right? Her mistake was falling in love with him.
And don't get me wrong, I do expect that by the end of the story, for some reason or another, he's going to have to stay in this life of Gotham rather than going back to his like happy life with Rita. Let's face it, Rita's probably going to die or something, and that's going to send him down a warpath.
Yeah, it's almost like from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's like Angelus versus Angel, right? Where Penguin's kind of his Angelus side, the evil, right? But then here, when he's Oswald, this is, his true self. This is his conscience, and this is why he's doing everything. So, I would be careful though to jump to the word conscience. I don't know if Penguin gives a shit about the bad things he's doing here. Maybe he does. Maybe he is at a point where he does care about those things. I think he's just. I could argue that this final moment is just him. The weight of keeping up this act is just so difficult, and because he wants to save Rita, that's what's making him break down here, rather than that he actually feels bad that he's doing any of the shit that he's doing. Well, yeah. When I say conscience, I mean he's doing this for her. She's the motivating, right? It's not right or wrong. It's what's right to get her free, right? And so, Like that page right there with the white background, just the pain in his eyes. Like the Latorre just kills it on that, because that could have had no dialogue or anybody, and you know exactly what's going on in his mind.
Yeah. Because even that line, "I'm no good, there's nothing good in me," I suppose that does back up your idea of it. There's a bit of a conscience element to this to play. It's almost like he felt like he was becoming a good person with her, but he's found it much easier than perhaps he thought it would be to just be who he was before. But yeah, it's very an interesting dynamic, I'm glad that the book that King has went out of his way to remind us that this is the whole reason for this, because like I said, like when it got to this page, I was like, wait, I don't know who this is, and I had to go back and double check.
Well, yeah, in my deep mind, I remembered, but I had just forgotten because just the entire caper aspect of it, right?
Yeah, we spent so long with him, like building his team and getting the help. Which, by the way, I laughed when Agent F turned to the help and went, "Who the hell are you?" That was funny. But yeah, like we spent so long building the team, and now he's coming back, and like these first interactions with these kids, and all the Batman stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah. There was an entire other motivation, like, for why he was doing this in the first place. So I was really glad that they reminded us of that. I think it was a good point to do it. If anything, it might have even been useful a bit earlier. Like, maybe when he first got back to Gotham, just to be like, hey, here's a reminder going into the second arc of this. This is why he's doing this. This is what the core reason for him being this is. And I think it also adds this idea that every single other person we see narrating don't actually, like, because they all don't know what's going on in his head, and that's been part of the magic of this book, is that everyone else is sort of narrating and sort of speculating or saying what they think Penguin's thinking or what he's going to do. This idea that we're here seeing was actually in his head here in this moment. We're seeing what he actually cares about here. But everyone else is like, oh, he's scary. He might do these bad things to me. He may do those bad things, but that's not the true him in his head that we're seeing here at the end of this issue.
Well, and that's what I like too, is that there's no one else in the van with him. It's just him and Rita.
Oh, that's important. It would not work if there was anyone else there.
Yep.
Because it's just
them. And that's where, it is just, man, I never thought I'd care about the Penguin this much, because I'm kind of rooting for him, right? Like, he's a very complex character. It's kind of Breaking Bad that way, right? Where you're kind of rooting for Walter, even though he's doing bad things. You know, it's a man's soul. It's like his search for purpose.
I would actually say that's the wrong comparison. I'd say Better Call Saul's a better comparison. Because Rita's kind of like Kim here, in that she's the innocent one, and I can kind of see the end of the story being Penguin making the noble choice to let her go and be away from him, because like being with him is just going to lead her down a path that he doesn't want to put her through. I could see that being very much the lesson by the end of this. But how great would an Odenkirk Penguin be, though? Now that you say that, like, I don't know. I'm trying to imagine him being menacing, and I don't know. I
think he can be. There's a certain darkness to him that maybe not like this, not like violent sociopath, right? But I definitely feel like Odenkirk can play the guy that you don't want to cross. You know. So, but yeah, no, that is a much better of Saul than Breaking Bad. However, it is the complex character where I'm liking Penguin and I want him to win, but at the same time, what is he winning? Right? Is it that he gets to be the big scary person that's easy for him to be, or is it that he gets Rita's freedom? And does Rita's freedom mean freedom from him as well? Like, so the ultimate goal is to get her out of there, but not be with her, and it's kind of a Pyrrhic victory at that point.
Well, I don't think that's his goal. I'm reading ahead there. I don't think that's his goal right now. I don't think he's learned that lesson. If that's where we're going, where he wins her freedom, but then says, "No, I can't come with you. I have to stay away from you." I don't think he's got to the point yet. I think that's a towards the end of the story realization for him. I don't think that's what the active goal is right now. The active goal right now is just to get her free.
No, this is definitely one that I can't wait to read back through, because there is a lot of layers going on here. And also I want to point out the very beginning, the narration from the Silent Majority, where he doesn't know who's the real him. That also goes into kind of the Penguin, right? Because the narration's all about like, well, I don't know which one died. I don't know what learned, I don't know who he learned. And then we see them setting the bomb with Major Victory. And I think that's a very, another complex thing with that character, right?
Yeah, that narration was really interesting because it was kind of like almost as if it was like Two-Face and like Harvey like narrating, but he wasn't the one in control. So he's like, "Oh, Two-Face is doing this thing, so it's a good thing I'm not here." That's kind of how it read, and I was like, "Okay, this is interesting because it's like a different character that I'm not really that familiar with." So
but it's like when multiples of a person die, like what does that mean for them? And like who was the real one? And I think that also it reflects Oswald at this point.
Yeah,
like, is the real one at this point? Is it the real menacing scary guy, or is it the guy breaking down crying to Rita?
Yeah, I think thematically that it goes along with that really nicely. Yeah. But hey, no, this is excellent because like I think all this conversation has been kind of rich in terms of like we're talking about characters, their motivations, and that tends to be when I'm when I'm reviewing TV shows, when I can talk about character motivations and what's actually making them do certain things, that tends to be when I like, oh, this is excellent writing. And I feel like this book is definitely tinkering with that. So, really, really good. What are you giving The Penguin, Matt?
I'm going to give this a 9.
Yeah, I'm going 9 as well. It's excellent stuff. So, very, very good. Next up, Power Girl, issue 8, Leah Williams writing with Eduardo Pansica on the art.
So we are tying into the Brainiac stuff here, and this picks up with Paige trying to learn how to roller skate in the park. I think it's Centennial Park in Metropolis. And it's her and Omen. She's given Omen a replay of what happened in that fantasy realm from the last 2 issues in Farimbia. And Paige, despite having superpowers and all this stuff, cannot figure out how to roller skate. And so Omen's helping her up and trying to coach her through, and, giving her lessons on, it's like, you got to tuck your pelvis in, like you're pulling your belly into your spine, and Paige starts to get frustrated. And as she's talking to her, she goes, oh, but I think you're just thinking about too many other things. You're not being able to focus on these simple tasks, like that guy. And she makes Omen put another quarter in the psychic jerk jar. So anytime Omen kind of oversteps her bounds as a psychic and starts to dig too deep into Paige's mind, she has to put into the douche jar, put that into the douche jar. Can't talk because I saw Streaky. But yeah, Streaky's, it's a very funny page that Streaky's staring at it. But yeah, so there's a guy named Axel, and that she's been talking to. He was the guy from earlier on in the arc, and he's elsewhere scaling down a building, like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, like in full, almost like ninja gear with his face covered. And Paige sends him a text wanting to know if they're like serious about things, which gets him distracted enough that he doesn't realize the Brainiac drone's coming around the corner. And he ends up getting picked up because he's a science guy. So he gets picked up, and Omen and Paige come across where Lois was doing yoga in the same park. And as they're in the park, they see all of the bots come in, and Paige ends up snapping into action and not transforms, but ends up in her Power Girl suit. And she ends up fighting some Zarnians and the Brainiac drones. And she's very confused because, she doesn't know who these guys are. They all swarm her. She ends up fighting them off. Omen gets taken also in this attack. And Paige ends up getting overwhelmed by the drones, and they scan her and leave her there. So they deem her not worthy of taking, which is interesting. So she tries to stop the Zarnians. They all teleport out, and she ends up surveying the scene of like a destroyed Metropolis. She sees Jimmy on the ground, because Silver Banshee has just been taken. She hopes that Axel's okay. She goes to the Kent family apartment, and there's nobody there. So she ends up going back, and they even took Streaky, right? And so as she's in her apartment looking to, taking onto account, Superman shows up and explains what's going on in case people aren't reading, and says, I have to go find them, but I'm going to need help keeping watch over the city. And so, Paige volunteers, and we get like this really cool overview of Metropolis and the different sections of town. And there's each a different hero that's helping, right? So you have Steel is keeping watch over Suicide Slum. Hot Girl, who from her book, she was in A-Town, which is where all the alien immigrants live. She's relocated to Metropolis, but she's going over like the airport area and patrolling the skies. Natasha's over at Strikers, so that leaves Paige in A-Town, and she looks down and she sees a Zarnian, but it's Crush. So she thinks that Crush is part of this. She goes to question her, and they end up getting into a fight. And this is where people might need to tell me about Crush, because I know next to nothing about her outside that she's Lobo's daughter. And maybe
he was
a clone.
He was the bad replacement in the Demolition.
Yeah, but he got a surfer gimmick, and that was pretty funny with Mr. Fuji.
Yeah, he was Disciples of Apocalypse at one point. I don't know. He was
Yes.
These are all
Brian Crush Adams.
Yeah,
I know
these
that
are all
much.
wrestling jokes, guys. Yes. I'm sorry.
Anyways, Crush has this like weird, looks like a psionic like chain that she can control. So it wraps up Paige, and she ends up having a group of friends called the Holiday Girls, and it says, meanwhile, elsewhere in Metropolis, there's a bunch of voices coming out of a dumpster, and it's a bunch of the Zarnians that somehow hung out enough to not get taken back, and they end up saying, like, this is our freedom. We're finally free of Brainiac. He's not going to notice, and they pick up one of the blasters, and they end up incinerating one of their other people. So now they're going to run around Metropolis causing havoc. So a nice little tie-in. I also skipped over that Superman is like, well, you probably didn't get taken because you're from Earth 2, right? They're not registering you as a Kryptonian from this realm. So that's why she didn't get taken like the rest of them did, which I think is a fair enough, a fair enough surmise. But yeah, pretty decent tie-in that I felt like even if I wasn't reading the main two books, you would kind of get a good enough vibe of what's going on. Although if you're reading this and not the other super books, I don't understand why. But my main problem with this is in the bigger sense is it just feels like between Night Terrors and everything else, this book's not being able to stand on its own. It's seeming to having to tie into things and take sidetracks, and it's kind of losing the part of the book that I really liked, and that's like Omen and Paige's relationship and their whole getting into the heads of superheroes and trying to help them fight their problems that way. And like the little sidetrack with into Farimbia with Supergirl was nice because it got to build on Kara and Paige's relationship. But yeah, I just feel the book's kind of lacking its own identity. So, but it's still fine. The art's pretty decent. Everything looks the way it can, and I think it falls into the house style a little bit. But the action sequences are drawn well. The layouts are pretty typical. I do really like that page of Metropolis because I like when you can kind of get the geography of one of these cities. It's like when they do like a map of Gotham, and you can see where the Narrows are in relation to the rest of the city. But yeah, so I'll give this a 7.
Okay. Pardon me. So I've got a Patreon book to wrap things up this week. American Vampire Second Cycle issue 7. So last issue established that we're doing space stuff and set up that we're going to split into 2 teams. One's going to go after the big weapon underground. The other one's going to try and stop the Russian satellite from seeing that stuff's going on to avoid nuclear war. The book opens with like a pool party where these vampire monsters come out through the ground. Like the ground literally just cracks open and they come out. They do talk though, because like the guy yells, "Please don't, I have kids," and he's like, "Oh, point them out," as if, yeah, we'll kill them next. Point them out so we can murder them. But we come back to them later on. So we have Pearl and Felicia together with the kind of like rock monster vampire golem dude that's in that was in the last issue. But he's in the back of the truck just pretending that he's a statue, and they stop for fuel, and they're debating their route and what they're doing and how difficult this is. And Felicia calls her Miss Jones, and she's like, "Hey, we should probably be on a first name basis." So they're kind of bonding a little bit, and talking about what the plan is and how it's kind of a really tough, like, not quite a suicide mission, but this is kind of as bad as it gets. But notably, their mission is not as bad as the others. They're going to be using like Brune, who's the name of the monster dude. He's a tunneler, so he's going to actually sort of sneak them in by tunneling underground, which you can do in a reasonable number of hours. So that sets up what they're going to do, and that's pretty much it. There's a little bit of comedy here though, because as the guy's like giving them fuel, he like goes up to Brune in the back and says, "Damn, you're one ugly lawn gnome." And as the truck's driving away, Brune just flips the bird at him. Like, he just stays still but flips the bird at him, and he's like, "Huh?" So that's that. We get a little sort of interstitial here where in 1960, which is about 5 years before this, we see like a space pod crash in the middle of like a car factory in Detroit. And they're like, "What the hell is that?" And there's an astronaut inside it. And when they pull off the mask, we just get the reaction of the people who are looking at him. And whoever's in the mask says, "Hey, can you tell me if this is Texas?" And he landed in Detroit, so a little bit off target.
Yeah.
Just a touch.
About 1,000 miles.
And it cuts to like Skinner, Calvin, and this guy with the mask who was the astronaut. Basically, they sent up an undead person in the first ever mission to space. And that's what these characters in the flashback were reacting to, is that basically they didn't know what space travel would do to a living person. So they sent up this undead guy. And it's actually why NASA are still kind of friendly with the VMs, even though every other US agency and government and whatever all have cut ties with them. NASA still was like, "Oh no, they kind of did us a solid by giving us someone who wasn't a human being to go into space and test that stuff out." So... but basically, they explain more of what they have to do here is that the satellite takes photos like once per hour or something like that, and then once a week it shoots out like a tape of film, right, which comes down to Earth, and they need to go up there and stop it from shooting out this next like collective batch of film, right? Which is funny because you think, does that mean that there's like a limited number of, because if it's shooting out like a physical thing with the images on it every single week, surely there's only so many like
reels
that
are up there.
Yeah, like eventually it's going to run out. But obviously maybe they restock it or something with their own space missions.
Yeah.
But that's what they're going to do. They're going to do that. They're going to go into a shuttle or a rocket where there's going to be 2 astronauts actually flying it, and then there's a compartment for 2 undead people, and it's going to be the other guy and Calvin that are going to go in there, not Skinner. Skinner's to stay down and do whatever. But as we go a bit later, we see that Pearl has a nightmare where the kids that she saved at the start of this like second cycle story show up and like turn into monsters and come after her with the Grey Trader behind them. And she gets scared, so she calls Skinner. And he's actually freaking out as well because like the infection that he's got is getting worse, and he's seeing like horses running in front of him. And it kind of ties into a comment he made in the previous like scene, because he mentioned that when they're talking about, oh, there's something on the rocket that'll help the astronauts, it's called a computer. He's like, "Oh, we should have stopped at horses. That was much better. I need to let a cat out, so vamp or something."
Gotcha. So yeah, him being a Luddite makes a lot of sense, being that he's from the Old West. So him not trusting machines is real funny, despite the fact that like the first time we see Skinner in story, like his origin involves trains and stuff. So it makes sense that he doesn't trust technology.
Yeah, he's an old-fashioned dude. He's he's been around for a long time.
He likes licorice and killing people, and that's about it.
Yeah. So Yeah, he talks to Pearl. Pearl's like, hey, I've been having these bad nightmares. And he tries to sort of say, oh, it's just bad dreams, Dolly, calm down. But as he's saying this, he's looking worse and worse. And then the cliffhanger at the end of this page is a gun is pointed at the back of his head. And then when you turn the page, it's the other three VMs that are there. It's Calvin, the guy that's in charge, and the dude in the mask. And they're like, look, you're infected. We can see you're infected. You're going to turn into one of the Grey Traders monsters. It's just a matter of time. We have to do this. We're not happy about it, but we have to put you down. And he's like, look, I can fight this. I'm stronger than anyone else that's ever been infected by this. I'm Skinner Sweet. I'm not some just agent or whatever. Like, I'm not a girl. I can fight this. But of course, as they're having this standoff, the monsters that came up through the ground at the start of the issue come in, and they're what do they call them? They are the sixth breed, which are parasites. That they're basically humans that turn into these monsters that come from the Grey Trader, or the thing that he's protecting underneath the ground.
Yeah, the cosmic horror.
Yeah,
which I kind of like, because I remember in Survival of the Fittest learning that all monsters are kind of an offshoot of vampires. And now it seems like vampires are an offshoot of whatever that main evil cosmic horror thing is.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that there's a a monster family tree.
Yeah. So and they're fighting the monsters, and they shout out, "Sweet, you know what? We'll let it go if you just help us fight these things, and we'll maybe like try and hold off for a bit." And then the final page is that Skinner's already turned into a monster. Now, I'm pretty confident that he's going to turn back into Skinner somehow, just because I'm pretty sure I've seen him on front covers for later issues.
Yeah.
But he's this big monstrous thing. His jaw's extended. The entire page is like red. There's like red smoke around him. It's really going for like a big, huge, epic cliffhanger kind of thing. Yeah, I dug this issue. It wasn't quite the fascinating info dump that the last issue was, but the actual sort of like tightening up what the actual plan is for the space stuff and what they're doing. There's okay, we have an understanding of what they're actually trying to accomplish by getting into space now. There's not too much of Pearl and Felicia, but it is kind of interesting having them sort of like buddy up, because like they feel like the two most like main characters, because whenever it wasn't Pearl that was like in an arc, Felicia and her father were the ones that were in an arc. So it's kind of interesting having those two come together finally and like, giving them a scene with each other. The art's obviously great, as it usually is from Albuquerque, and he gets to do some different stuff here with having a space rocket and an astronaut suit and stuff like that. Because he's been doing vampires now for like 40, 50 issues. Like he's had plenty of time with that sort of stuff. But yeah, this definitely felt like a setup issue though, and not in a bad way. But it definitely felt like, okay, this is the in between as we're getting to the other stuff. But I did like them fleshing out the NASA lore a little bit, and the stuff with Pearl and Felicia. So I would probably just go with like a straight 8 out of 10 on this one. Really good, but not a standout issue either. So something in that kind of range. But that's American Vampire Second Cycle issue 7, which will take us out of the final part of the show, where we pick our favorite things of the week, favorite panel/moment, favorite cover, favorite art, and of course top 5 books, or in my case this week top 3. So what's your panel/moment of the week, Matt?
All right, let's see. Something from Flash? No, that was too heady. I'm actually gonna go from Batman, and then it's gonna be the whole sequence where Gordon's talking to Batman, and then when Batman ghosts him, and you get that little smile, because it also has like a smiling Batman on top of that too, which is just so weird to see. So just kind of joy all around in a book that has been kind of about the horrors of fascism.
Yeah, detective, by the way, not Batman. Just
I'm sorry, detective. I'm sorry.
I know what you meant.
I'm sorry.
But...
I said something good about a Batman book, and it set your thing, or about the Batman book, and it set your things off.
There's a few things I could take from Penguin, but I'll probably go with detective as well. I'll go with the Dark Knight Rises big giant flaming logo to announce his return. Like I don't know, I'm a sucker for that type of moment. For covers, I only looked at the books I read. Typically, there's a Matina variant for Penguin, which is obviously very nice. But if I have to pick the Fernández variant for Detective, which is just Batman gliding over the city, and it's got that yellow glow that we talked about. So it really matches what's in the interiors, but it's just a gorgeous image.
I get why this wasn't the cover, because the covers have been going on the theme over the time. But this is a very good cover for that book. So,
yeah, I think it's the best cover of the week.
Yeah.
What's your pick?
So I want to shout out. There's a Flash cover by Matt Taylor, and it's just got like one of those big hands and doing all this like swirly stuff around Wally. It's very kind of the vibe of the book, where you can't really get a sense of what's going on, but you kind of think that you do. A lot of red and yellow. It looks really, really good. And then you'd already shouted out that Javier Fernández. And then I want to talk about a couple Power Girl covers. There is a W. Scott Forbes cardstock variant that's really nice. That's just, her like doing a little salute while flying. But my cover of the week is the Irvin Rodriguez cardstock variant for Power Girl, which it looks like an old school pinup. So it's done in one of those photorealistic kind of styles, where she almost looks like Marilyn Monroe, and there's a bunch of like star balloons around her in red, yellow, and blue, and it's a very fun composition. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about best art of the week?
Okay, that's going to Penguin. Like, shouts to Tech, but Latorre is fantastic.
Yeah. It's hard to argue that, really. Like, well, you know what? I think I might edge it out and give it to Tech. Okay. It's really close, and I like both the art in the main story and the backup, so I think I'm just going to edge out. But obviously, part of that's also that De La Torre's probably won it several times in the weeks that Penguin's been out. So I feel like the fact that something's even making me doubt that is worth a little bit of a celebrating. So
yeah.
All right, top 5 books, Matt.
All right, so number 1 is going to be Penguin, 2 is Detective Comics, 3 is Flash, 4 is Power Girl, and 5 is Green Arrow.
Yeah, despite me picking Detective for everything else, number 1 is Penguin, number 2 is Detective, and number 3 is Flash. There you go, easy. That was one of the easiest rankings I've ever had to do at the end of end of an episode. So I'll tell you now what's coming next week from DC Comics, and it is a week 5. Because Tuesday is still April and we're getting annuals and stuff. So coming out next week, we have Nightwing Annual 2024, we have Flash Annual 2024, Harley Quinn Annual 2024, we got Free Comic Book Day 2024 Absolute Power Special Edition. Now, notably, this is out on the Saturday, so this will be like a last minute read, but this is always the case with the Free Comic Book Day stuff, so we'll just read that before the show. It's not a big deal. We got Superman House of Brainiac Special Issue 1, so part of that event. So it's effectively an annual, it's just not called that. And then we got the Spring Breakout, which is your $10 anthology book. There's a Free Comic Book Day Man Magazine thing. There's a Free Comic Book Day Batman Arkham's Special Edition. Barkham Special Edition,
Barkham.
Yeah. And then we got Free Comic Book Day Bardus Special Edition as well. So yeah, I mean, basically there's 5 annual or annual size books, and then the big 100-page anthology Spring Break thing. So
and also, so you know, that the Nightwing annual is written by Travis Moore with art by Travis Moore. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, but it's about the Pirate Queen.
I'm less excited. I'm less excited. I don't dislike the character.
Notice I sold you with the exciting stuff.
Yeah, the whole pirate ship thing wasn't really my thing. And Flash has been kind of an interestingly wonky run.
Although this one ended was said to be continued in the Flash annual, so I'm sure we'll get whatever's going on with Wally answered in that one.
Which is fine, but it's a bit of a wonky run. Meaning that I'm left with Williamson in a special for his Superman arc, which it has been good so far, admittedly, but I'm expecting him to fumble it, and this could be the issue where he fumbles it.
Yeah, it's got art by Tom Derenick and Scott Koblish and George Cambadai and a monkey Noelpin. So there's going to be a lot of artists flipping around. So maybe it's not just all about what Wally's doing. So
yeah, it may just be one story out of 3 or whatever.
Yeah. So
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that said, Travis Moore art we have to look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. All right. Well,
that went over as a lead balloon.
I'm just like, this is not exciting. Like, annual weeks can be tough sells at the best of times, but this is a particularly not exciting annual week. But I mean, there's nothing else to read, so that's what's happening. I guess the Free Comic Day special teasing like a little bit of the Absolute Power stuff is probably the most. That'll be the top of the show because it's the start of the next event effectively, or the lead into it. So
I really hate that failsafe Batman's front and center. That just grinds my gears.
No, I get it. But that is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this weird week, and next week's a weird 5th week, so there's just a weird part of the month, I guess. But we'll be back next time with a number of those books we just mentioned, and we'll take it from there. This has been DC Comics Podcast, Comics from the Multiverse, episode 405. Let us know what you thought of the books in the comments. You can, of course, support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Helps out a bunch, of course, if you do. And that's pretty much it. Check out the other YouTube channels, MailFuzz Movies, MailFuzz TV. You can find me with other people reviewing movies or TV shows at the various ones. So that is the show. I am so tired. I'm barely speaking with any coherence. So I am going to put the edit on this, get it rendering, and pass out. So
do that.
Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Keep reading comics, and remember to never get lost in the Speed Force.